Hello, hello. I want to talk about living in a highly conditional world. This was a recommendation from someone I coach, which I thought was an excellent topic, since loneliness tends to be a fear that many people develop as they start becoming more rational and practicing the tools of Stoicism and philosophy. And the reason why this tends to happen is because of the world right now is very gung-ho, and it's not right now, it's been like this forever. If you read Stoicism, it's been like this since the Colosseum and since people are highly addicted to negative emotions, etc., etc. So, as I became better at wearing my emotions, because it's not about eradicating emotions, it's about wearing emotions, and the swings aren't nearly as bad, you start to feel as if you're very, very lonely. I used a very good example where if you took a prominent, person from a very well-to-do, say, British family, very proper family, and you put them in a make sure this isn't bouncing around so much, and you put them in a very, very poor socioeconomic place, it would be very difficult for the individuals to relate to them, the individuals that live in that really poor area, because they're so accustomed to that world that they live in. Right? So this is a really, really common thing that many people go through when you're becoming more rational. I know I became really, really bad with this because I was seeing the world in a much different way. I'll give you an example. I was watching one of the political debates here in America last night, and you're having individuals who talk over each other. They can't take their turn. People have really low frustration tolerance. They can't wait for their time to be up. They have to put people down. It's a lot of personal attacks and stuff like that. And I think that that's something that really hinders our ability to communicate. And the reality is that unless someone comes in for change, it's like when people ask me, do you help family members? No, I don't. And the reason why or friends, is because when they don't, and I made this mistake, unless they're coming in for help on their own terms, the chances of them changing are very, very rare. Again, this is a mistake that I made myself, looking for people, hey buddy, looking to change other people, looking to show them, because when you practice rational thinking, you start to see the world in a way that makes a lot more sense, and you start to realize how highly irrational the world is. So before I go any further, please subscribe. Hit that like button down below. That WhatsApp link should be right there to direct message Phil. Again, if it's not, please email us at phil@ocdrecovery.com. Let me see again if I could just kind of tighten this up a little bit. There we go. It might have been bouncing in all the other videos. I just didn't realize. Just let me know in the comments down below if this is a little bit more difficult for you to pay attention when I have it in this format, and then I'll just make more of them in my office. So the first thing to remember is that rational thinking isn't for anyone except for the individual that's practicing it. So as you start to practice rational thinking, it's very easy to go down this route where you want other people to see the world through how you see it. But this is very similar to someone who, say, practices Christianity, going to Saudi Arabia, to a Muslim-based country. I think it's a Muslim-based country, or Qatar, or anywhere like that. Again, I'm not a theologist, so I don't know that. But then trying to be like, this is why you're wrong. That ain't going to go over too well. That individual doesn't want to change. They have a belief system that's set in stone in the Muslim faith. Maybe they read the Quran, or they pray 5 times a day, and they go to mosque. The chances of them listening to you is very, very, very rare. That's just the way the world is. So part of this is accepting the realities of life. The other thing is realizing that you were once very, very, very irrational. Humans, by default, in my opinion, my theory is, because we're herd creatures and we're very much don't like rejection because of the genetic biological component with that, we don't want to change our beliefs because it gives us a sense of threatening on our identity. So what people do is they avoid changing their beliefs at all cost. So, and I say the reason why OCD sufferers have probably a higher probability of change than non-OCD sufferers, is because we are forced to change because of our emotional disturbance. Where non-OCD sufferers, they have emotional disturbance, but because it's not locked in at the chronic level, they will, in my opinion, be more resistant at times, not always, to change, because they don't need to change, because they can experience strong irrational beliefs and it not really affect them. So, and that's something that many people get wrong. They think that, because they because they don't have emotional disturbance, that they don't actually have anything to change. Simply not the case. It's like saying that venting only affects non-OCD sufferers. Not true. Venting doesn't show any promise in any regard from a chronic standpoint to even people who don't vent, because it's very, very passive and it's not proactive. So it's easy to go down that trap when you have OCD because the emotional disturbance is so strong. So the first thing I had to really realize is exactly what I said, that this was for me. That took me a couple of years. So, second of all, I had to realize that my loved ones, the people around me the most, such as my wife, my mom, my sister, and family members, were perfectly allowed to think and believe exactly how they wanted. And it wasn't until I believed that I stopped trying to change people, which I really, really struggled with. I struggle with that as a coaching perspective too, because you want to help OCD sufferers, but there's a difference between helping and guiding OCD sufferers versus demanding that they get better. And the more you demand that they get better from a coach, a therapist, a medical doctor, a psychologist, a chiropractor, a physical therapist, if you're demanding more for the patient than they're demanding on themselves or your client or whoever you're working with, you are going to set yourself up for a world of hurt and emotional pain, because you have a belief that they must listen, they must do what you say. That's where that strong conditional, other and conditional life acceptance comes in. So that's not going to be a viable option long term. You can try it, but you'll be beating your head against a brick wall trying to change people when they don't want to change themselves. Again, it doesn't mean you can't guide. It's the belief system about, I'm going to try and help people. There's a good chance most people won't listen to me, and that's okay. Even if no one listens to me, that's also okay. And I can still go out there and try to help people, even if it only comes to a couple people throughout my entire life. That's something that most people don't want to do, because they want to be able to help people, to use that to brag to other people about how they help people. So it's another thing that people do. So the third thing is that the world is more than likely going to get worse with this. Populism is a term where people become very, very gung-ho about their beliefs and they don't want to change. So we're living in this time period right now where when people hold a belief system, they're extremely rigid on that belief system and they're not willing to change that for anything, which is a understandable but problematic belief system. So many people hear me talk about, I expose myself to things that I particularly might not agree with, whether it's politics, money, or religion. The reason why I say politics, money, and religion is because those are the three topics where people tend to get hurt the most in arguments, trying to convince other people, crime and stuff, extreme ideologies. That happens with many other topics as well, but money, politics, and religion are topics where people hold them in extremely rigid fashion. If you watch documentaries or you watch businessmen or women and the way they talk about business, it's very much coming from, this is why I'm right, why you're wrong, you're an idiot, and et cetera, et cetera. Politics and religion, very much like that. And again, it's not the political belief that's the problem. It's not the religious belief that's the problem. It's the rigidity of the belief that you hold. So there's a big difference between, this is the way I want to live my life. These are my assigned values. There's no such thing, more than likely, as universal values and principles. There can't be a universal principle to be a good person. The reason why, more than likely, why 99% of the world believes that is because that, A, everyone believes it. And two, when you commit acts, hey buddy, when you commit acts to do things that potentially harm other people, whether it's an intent or losing control, that brings along feelings that you don't enjoy. So by default, people take that and go, oh, this means something from a universal higher perspective. But that's probably not the case. Because if that was the case, and universal principles of being good, we wouldn't have Ted Bundy, we wouldn't have Gary Ridgway, we wouldn't have had Hitler, Stalin, or any Mao, or any of these other people that committed, hey bud, I love how this squirrel is just above my head. In that fashion, from a historical perspective. And again, just highlighting what we see on the basis of what humans are capable of committing on mass murderous levels, etc. So we obviously know that there cannot be a universal principle to be a good person, because there are people out there that have acted in horrendous manners from an action perspective. So we know that obviously can't be the case. So knowing that I'm living in that world has given me a sense of loneliness perspective when I go somewhere and I think, how many people here are thinking like me, and not in a way where I'm like, I'm better than them, where it's almost a sad thing. It was actually quite sad for me. I would be lying to you if I didn't have moments of crying or something, or shedding tears, because I see how trapped people are in their beliefs about the money, politics, and religion, and fitness, and relationships, and stuff like that. And they have a really hard time seeing things from others' point of views. And because the world highly operates off acceptance means agreement, that's basically how they live their life. They have a very hard time in understanding that people can have different views and still accept someone for who they are while disliking the behavior. Another thing, to number 4, is if you're speaking to someone about these principles, that it's very, very common for them to become defensive, just how you would have probably become defensive if someone was talking to you about this for the first time. You need to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Imagine if you were practicing a religion and someone came up to you and said to you, you know what, in the most rational sense, there's probably a high probability that when you die, nothing happens and there's no consciousness, as there was no consciousness before, as Mark Twain said. I believe it was Mark Twain. I had no consciousness before death. I had nothing to fear, so why would I fear it now? Because there's more than likely nothing after death. Again, can't say that for sure. It's just a belief system I hold, which then scares the living shit out of people. Well, if you go up to someone and you hold that belief against them, the chances of them understanding or wanting to listen is almost zero. It's as close to zero as you can get. I wouldn't say certainty, but it's going to be a 0.00001% chance that they're going to see it from your view, because you're threatening their entire worldview. Just like when someone comes up to me and they're like, Ellis is extreme, or he's an idiot, etc., and I just don't see it that way, and I just won't engage in the conversation, because the conversation is probably not going to go anywhere, at least not in a positive direction. So that's the other thing to remember. Morning, how you doing?
Morning.
Good. How's your day going? Good. Always good to hear. And that's the number one thing about Stoicism that many people get wrong, is that when people look at when they look at Stoicism, they take those principles and will hold them against other people. But that's not Stoicism. That's not Buddhism. That's not being an Epicurean, how Epicurus was, who invented the philosophy of Epicureanism, or any of that stuff. And even the Stoics had a really hard time with that, of not accepting the Epicureans, because they would always argue with them. And I've read a few philosophy books in the last couple months where there's a lot of arguments about Epicurus and calling him an idiot and stuff like that. And I think that people highly underestimate how long it takes to shift your perspectives on these beliefs. It's a lifelong process. It's not something you could just snap into place. And if you're trying to snap it into place against other people, the reality is they're not going to listen, and they never will listen. So there is part of you that will want to lean, again, need to is actually the correct rational must. I always talk about there are these rational musts where people say no musts are good, but that's not true. In order to graduate college, you must pass the test. That's a rational must. So in order to lean into more unconditional acceptance, you must become accepting of the reality that you will probably feel lonely at times and disconnected from the world, because you're thinking at a level that you have to be so much deeper than the superficial level of like what's going on with Taylor Swift's new boyfriend, what's going on with the sports team. And again, it's not that you can't look into those and find happiness in talking about that or gossiping. It's just that your life will be much deeper than those things if you want to reach OCD and anxiety recovery, and you will feel lonely. So, and that's the reality. And it's that loneliness sensation and disconnected sensation is not an inherently bad one, okay? It's like anger. To say that anger is inherently bad might not actually be the best thing to say. It just has much more cons than pros. But I can understand why people get angry. If you have a civilization that's being overthrown and there's a lot of tyranny and murder, and they become very angry and rise together against a dictator, this makes understandable sense. That anger can have some benefits, but it also has a lot of cons. Okay, vengefulness and rage are not things you want to hold on a personal level at extremes. So that's just something to think about. At least it affected me like that. Again, we spend all day going over people's perspectives. I just got back to my house, good 15 minutes. And then we go from there. So if you guys want some more help with this, please let me know. This is how I really see the world now, and have been practicing this for a good few years. And I think it's a great way to live your life. It's not for everyone, but I think it's been very beneficial to me. So thank you again. Remember, Phil at OCDrecovery.com. We'll get back to you in a timely fashion. Enjoy the rest of your day.